Okay, so here's how we're going to do it.
It's
One of you, listen to the teams here, or teams listen. Go ahead and take the computer for me. One of you is going to become the mummy. I don't care who you decide who the mummy is. One of you is going to be the mummy. You guys know where I'm going with this? You guys see this in like youth group games or something like that? So the mummy person is going to just be there, and the other two partners are going to wrap them up with toilet paper, right? Maximum wrapping, head to toe. I want you to not be able to move like you're wrapped up like a mummy. You are mummified. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. The teammates, I'll let you figure out your strategy, how you want to actually do this. So go ahead and take that green wrapper off of the toilet paper. You guys got the same thing. Go ahead and take the green wrapper off the toilet paper. I'll give you a timer. As soon as we get situated here, I want you all to cheer them on with loud and thunderous applause and cheering. And this is how we are jumping into Egypt. You guys situated? You guys situated with your the toilet paper? Are you ready? Okay, talk about your strategy for just a second. So first, bro. Talk about your strategy for just a second while I get these sick background jams.
No, wait,
you get it? You know what you're doing? All right, audience, I need some participation from the audience. Make some noise! Woo! No. You're like the worst game show audience ever. On three, make some noise. 1, 2, 3. Woo! All right, participants, you may begin. Let's go. I have a 5-minute timer going. 5 minutes to totally mummify yourself.
Let me stop.
Just go.
Audience, help them out. You can help them out.
Stick it in her. Stick it in her.
You're the mummy.
You always want to go. Man, that should let him go in the field right
There
now.
we go.
Go tell him.
Who can help out Team Isaac? Who wants to help out Team Isaac?
Let's go, Logan.
Let's go.
Logan. Why not my homeboy? You gotta get you my homeboy on. The music gas.
It's the best toilet paper. It might break kind of easily.
She got an angel soul. It's funny.
I mean, I see the mummy starting to take shape. I'm not sure we're there quite yet. We're getting there. I almost feel like I'm in Egypt.
They don't know what they do.
Blaze says she's not seeing it. Blaze, you think you do better?
Rat me.
Yeah, hey, right here. Blaze and Aiden are going to show you how to do it. The peanut gallery, be careful. All right, now we're cruising.
That's what they do wrong.
Tell me.
You want to see me?
By this? right, guys, just 1 more minute. 1 minute for full round. Tyra, go wrap eight. Tyra, go use that to wrap eight. Look at that teamwork.
I don't even know what she's doing. It's covering his face.
What the crap? I'm trying to get this stuff.
Don't wrap. All right, get to that final wrap. These guys are cruising. Isaac, you got the cut rate, Mummy. I'm not sure Isaac's mummy makes it into 1,000 years. See ya, stay there. I want to get a picture of everybody at the end here.
Oh my God.
Welcome, Miss Rosa. We're in Egypt.
Hey, y'all look at my mouth looks like a small.
So, Miss Rosa, we started with 2 teams, and then Peanut Gallery over here said they could do it better. So I tossed them a roll of toilet paper. They doing all right. Blaze is like, yeah, we're doing all right. That's right. All right, Isaac, if you can weeble your way on over here. Yeah, you are. That's wonderful. You just stay right there. And Aiden, I know they're doing your legs. If you can hobble on over here, I'll get a picture of all of y'all.
I can't see. How can I?
I'll get a picture of all of y'all.
I can't see.
You got to trust your team.
Hey, y'all go around my face when you come.
Y'all pick him up.
Y'all got my feet. Y'all got my feet.
Yeah, we got everything. He does. You got forces on? You got some Egyptian.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's our best word ever.
All right, Aiden, hobble on over. We get a picture of the
Straight.
I don't want to mess with toilet paper.
Straight.
Yeah, you better not miss
We
out.
got like
Let's go. She can't hop.
Knox, just help me get over there, like right there.
Straight.
Just close enough.
Straight. What you give me?
All right, teammates, clear on out. Let me just get these 3 mummies. Sorry. That's good, right there.
I need my teammates behind me.
We'll do teammates in a second. Mummies first. 1, 2. Just look at my voice. 1, 2, 3. Teammates, get in there. Teammates, get in there behind them. You helped out. Teammates, get in there. 1, 2. 1, 2. Kimberly, a little more. 1, 2. Eyeballs. 3. Miss Rosa, do you mind?
I wanted to rap.
Yeah, you don't know, but I'm right next to you. I'm right next to you.
Just get you.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, cheese. 1, 2, 3.
All right, and now for my favorite portion. On 3, you're going to explode yourselves, mummies. 1, 2. That means you're going to get out of the toilet paper on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bust out. Aiden's good at everything. Aiden wants you to know he's the best at everything. All right, you made a mess. I invited the chaos. That's fine. Go ahead and take your seats. Welcome to Egypt. You feel like we're here? Do you feel like we've arrived in Egypt?
Not you, bro.
All right. I have the high energy kickoff. Miss Roger's going to hand you a notes page. These notes are just going to help you follow along as we learn a whole lot more about You don't know how to toilet paper a house? Your kids do that anymore? You gotta have the lead line, and then you throw it into the tree. I was real good at that in 7th grade. Real good at that in 7th grade.
Nope.
It's under your.
All right, let me ask you. We have obviously started with some fun. Let's tuck on in for the learning. What do you think you know about Egypt? What are some
Pyramids.
Pyramids, okay. Gold. Gold pharaohs. Pharaohs. I like it, right? What else? Huh? Mummies. Okay, mummies.
Big boats.
Big boats. Caskets with mummies?
Yeah.
Caskets with mummies?
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. Logan walked in today. Like, I'm not kidding. 7:30, bell rings. Logan walks in. He goes, I'm really excited to learn about Cleopatra. And I said, son, I'm really glad you know that we're going to Egypt today. So Cleopatra as a pharaoh, as a pharaohess, that's good. What about what Hollywood movies have you maybe seen about Egypt? Right, gives you that stereotype. Anyone?
What about the big cat?
What about the money?
Draw something.
The mummy.
Perfect.
The mummy.
What about the draw something saying it can take faces?
Take people's faces.
What's the name of the movie?
I don't know that one. Is that the mummy? Take their faces. I can't remember.
There's like 3 different.
How about Bible Belt, Georgia? Have you ever heard about Egypt in your church? Jesus went to Egypt as a baby. Okay, that's history. Okay, no matter what you think about the spiritual side, that's history. Baby Jesus escaped to Egypt in order to avoid mass execution of young boys. What else happens in Egypt? Old Testament style. Moses, the 10 plagues. He interacts with a pharaoh. And guys, this is history. Okay, this is recorded in other sources other than the Bible, Genesis, Exodus. So this is history related to ancient Egypt. So I like our working knowledge. Let's see, we said pyramids, we talked the Bible, pharaohs, mummies, and so we got a pretty good working knowledge of Egypt. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about things you've already said. We're going to talk about the big, like pharaohs and mummies. I'm going to give you some smaller side facts as well. And we only get to spend 2 days in Egypt. Okay, it's today and tomorrow. Got to move on from there in our world history class. But I hope I'll give you some curiosity, give you a reason to want to keep studying, and just, kind of open your eyes to a different civilization, ancient Egypt. So on your notes page, we're going to pick up this very next slide. Egypt can be broken down into 3 kingdoms. Ancient Egypt can be broken down into 3 kingdoms. And each kingdom kind of has very specific characteristics. So you can write on your notes right now, 1, 2, and 3. They're very creatively named. The Old Kingdom. In the middle, you have the Middle Kingdom. And then the most recent is the New Kingdom. Now, it's still ancient, but it's the most recent, so we call it the New Kingdom. Old, Middle, and New. You should just write those down. Those 3 are easy. We don't memorize a whole lot of dates. I had a portion on your notes where I asked you to write down the dates, but I just thought that was a little extra, so I took it off. You can see, though, that they each last about 800 plus years. So how long has America been a country?
Almost 1,000, right?
Woo! Okay. That's our starting point. We'll go down from there. America's been a country 244 years, I think, math. 240 plus years, right? America's been around for 240 years. These Egyptian kingdoms lasted 800 years each. Ancient Egypt has been a kingdom, a dominant civilization for most of world history. We sometimes like to put ourselves in the middle of the story. America, best country in the world. Okay, we got plenty of reasons to pat ourselves on the back, and got a whole class called U.S. history. We'll get there. But Egypt has been a dominant country and civilization far longer than the United States has. So I just want to give that to you for perspective. A little bit about the Old Kingdom. It is called the Age of the Pyramids. So when you think about those iconic pyramids, little inset picture there shows some of the largest ones. The large pyramids are not the only pyramids, and we'll talk more about pyramids here coming up. But pyramids were largely constructed during this first kingdom, the Old Kingdom. I don't know, again, what stereotype you might have. Every Egyptian gets buried in a pyramid. They're all large. They're all the largest wonders of the world. Pyramids, there's a variety of pyramids from large to small, and it is this Old Kingdom where they were mostly constructed. age of the pyramids. And this is when pharaohs were buried in the pyramids. That's the big purpose of the pyramids. It was a burial chamber for pharaohs. And I'll give you some more facts about that coming up as well. But Old Kingdom, age of the pyramids, pharaohs buried in pyramids. That's the dominant characteristic. So I know your notes say that second part, what is a major distinguishing feature? I want you to write down age of the pyramids, pharaohs are buried in pyramids. We're walking through a couple more slides just like this, so you can write down those distinguishing features as I talk about it. Egypt was split between an upper and a lower kingdom. So has, I don't know, the United States ever been split into two sections? Can you think about a time where the United States was split into two sections, like the North and the South, the USA and the Confederacy?
The Civil War.
Yeah, the Civil War time period. So Egypt, it was split into two different kingdoms. That doesn't mean it wasn't still unified under one single pharaoh. They had this, a country so large as Egypt. It's understandable that there was an upper kingdom and a lower kingdom. They had cultural differences. I should have started with this. Obviously, we started with we made a mess.
Yeah.
Let me. Can I get someone to show me where Egypt is? Aiden, let's go. Show me where Egypt is. He got me. He got me. Make sure we know where we're talking about.
Director right there. So this slide is where
It's got a rip right on it. My globe's not great. No, colder, other direction. Blue. In the middle of the ocean now.
Oh, so it's blue? Oh, it's in Africa?
I love that revelation. It's in Africa?
Right.
That's right. You found it? Now show everybody. Turn it so everybody can see.
Right, there you go.
Egypt is in North Africa. I don't know what you assumed. Aiden goes, this is in Africa? African, something we think Africa, African American, skin complexion, all that kind of stuff. Egypt is in North Africa. And now I'll put my finger on it, make sure everybody can see. A great globe here. I already gave them a story of a globe. Egypt is right here in North Africa. So this is the Egypt we're talking about. Now, ancient Egypt didn't have exactly these borders. It was larger, and Egypt has, with its national borders, has gotten a little bit smaller in the present day. But this is the Egypt we're talking about. So Old Kingdom, moving on to the Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom, aka the Golden Age. This is actually a time period where there's the most unity throughout the empire. Well, empire is the wrong word. Most unity throughout the kingdom, throughout the entire area. And this is when pharaohs were buried in hidden tombs. A little bit more on that. The reason for that is most of the pyramids. Anybody know the movie Lara Croft Tomb Raider?
Yes.
Yeah, most of the pyramids, and that's kind of a silly comic book hero, right? But the idea of tomb raiding is very real. And a lot of these pyramids got broken into and raided by bad guys because they're robbers, right? Grave robbers, tomb robbers. So because of that, pharaohs started to be buried in hidden tombs. Instead of that regal, large, majestic wonder of the world like a pyramid, they buried them in hidden tombs. And the reason for that has a lot to do with their religious beliefs. They believed that a pharaoh needed to be buried with all the items he would need in the afterlife. And if a grave robber came around and robbed the tomb of the weapons and the gold and the clothing and all the regal things that were buried inside of that tomb, then the pharaoh would not have those items in the afterlife. So this time period, pharaohs started to be buried in hidden tombs, and to this day, you might think we've figured out where they all are at this point, right? Surely 2022, we know where all these hidden tombs are. To this day, some of these tombs remain hidden. Archaeologists have not yet discovered them. So there's still more to be discovered in the world. I think that's pretty cool. Middle Kingdom, Golden Age, pharaohs buried in hidden tombs. You see that inset picture top left? I'm going to make a little bit of a blow up here. This shows the Egyptian social structure. I know we've talked about grapes. The S of grapes stands for what? Remember? Social structure. Perfect, right? I kind of already said it, and you remember that. Every society has a social structure, right? You could think about the social structure in America. You probably think about the social structure inside of Bacon County High School. Realistically, at the top, you have our superintendent, Miss Rowland. At the bottom, you have David Swanson, second-year teacher. And there are things in the middle. That's a social structure. That's one example. But here's just the Egyptian social structure, or since Egypt is known for pyramids, I think it's kind of easy to call it the social pyramid, right? Most social structures do have this triangular shape because at the top, there's only one boss at the top. Someone's going to be dominant. In Egypt, that was known as the Pharaoh. You guys kind of jumped on that. I'm dressed as the Pharaoh. You guys are aware that the Pharaoh is the leader of Egypt. What do we see at the bottom?
Slaves.
Slaves. Unfortunate that this is a society that had slavery, but unfortunately, there's a lot of slavery throughout the world for most of history, and even to the present day, right? We don't want to think about that, but unfortunately, there is still slavery in the present day in certain areas, certain nations. So from the top to the bottom, this is a basic social structure. Every society has something pretty similar to this. The words might be different, such as scribes, merchants, craftsmen. There might be different labels in those middle ranks, but conceptually, the big idea, there's a leader at the top, there is a lower class, whether it's the peasants or even a slave group at the bottom, and most social structures make this triangle shape. So I wanted to show you this picture. I wanted to blow it up and put it on the screen and just have that conversation a little bit, because it's true for all societies.
Even here in America, you have the President of the United States, which would be what? What part of that would he be? He would be at the very top. He would be the Pharaoh, right? Because he's our leader of our country. And then it trickles on down to us as citizens. And there's a lot in between. So every society deals with it. Whether it's a king or whatever.
We're going to talk about how religious officials fit into that, both in Egypt and in other societies. These days, you might say a pastor just has a job, right? Your pastor has a job. Different people approach religion differently. Well, in Egypt, religious officials were pretty high up there. So not something you need to have memorized by any means. I got it. But I want to show you the triangular shape of a social structure, showing you about Egypt, but also putting in your mind that pretty much every civilization has a social structure very similar. All right, talked old, talked middle. What is next? New kingdom. Excellent. New, I think, is kind of an interesting word because it is thousands of years old, but it is the newest one before the Egyptian monarchy kind of changes out and crumbles to the Romans. The New Kingdom. New Kingdom is called the Imperial Age, and since we keep talking about pharaohs, it is characterized as pharaohs being buried in the so-called Valley of the Kings. Pyramids to hidden tombs. And in this time period, this age, they buried pharaohs in the same area, and they protected that area with the military. So they said, hey, grave robbers, you're not going to be able to come into the Valley of the Kings. It's protected. We're going to bury all our pharaohs right here. No one's going to rob their graves. And because of that, because a lot of pharaohs were buried essentially like a cemetery, okay, all in the same area, this is where we get most of our knowledge about Egyptian pharaohs. Because archaeologists, hundreds of years later, were able to uncover treasures and mummies and information about pharaohs based off of the tombs they found in the Valley of the Kings. I got a funny question for you. We talk about grave robbers in a bad way. If you're going to go in the pyramid and rob the pharaoh's tomb and take out his treasures, you're a grave robber, and that kind of has a negative thought to it, right? If you're a robber, that's a bad person. What the heck's an archaeologist then?
Grave robber.
Modern day grave robber, right? An archaeologist goes into a pharaoh's tomb and takes out all of his treasures. Basically just a modern day grave robber. Something to think about. We don't like to see ourselves as robbers. We're scientists, or we're collecting information about civilizations. But really, we're kind of grave robbers too as we do that. Anyway. So any questions on these first three kingdoms? You guys followed along in the notes pretty well. I see some good handwriting, some good notes. You can always take a little side extra note. But if you follow along the notes, you're going to be right on track, and it's going to be the kind of information that's going to, eventually be on the study guide, be on the exam. So just stay in order, and we'll be good. Lyra.
Were the pharaohs killed?
Were they killed? Oh, great question. What do you think?
I think they just died of old age.
Died of old age. So you got this stately old 90-year-old figure who just passes away from old age, and then the next pharaoh, it's his turn to be the pharaoh. You think that is true for some?
Yeah.
But what was the first thing you said? Were they killed? Do you think that any pharaohs were killed?
Yeah.
Some. Why?
I mean,
Because
We
they
did
wanted their
look
spot.
into
Because someone else wanted their spot. Blake, what'd you say? What's that?
There's a lot of water.
A lot of war. Oh yeah, sometimes pharaohs would go to war. They were a military commander who would lead troops in battle. So you guys are getting a little ahead of me, and that's fine. I am going to answer these questions to just kind of tidy up Kyra's question, because I do love it when you guys interject. There's a lot of ways pharaohs died. Some of old age. Some were murdered from within the kingdom. Next guy wants to be the pharaoh. Some were killed in battle because they were military
Who
commanders.
becomes the pharaoh at the night? It's like the sun. It's like the
What's
sun.
that? What's your question?
The sun become the next pharaoh.
Yes, a great question, and this is a point I'm about to make, but I'll just go ahead and do it since Aiden brought it up. How did the next pharaoh step into the throne? Aiden, what did you just say?
The sun.
The son. That's right. It's a
Hereditary.
family lineage. So from the father to the firstborn son. Now, if you're the second-born
You
son,
gotta kill that first.
how do you feel? What's that?
You gotta kill the first.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of that, backstabbing and palace intrigue and murder that happened inside of families because of that. So, since we're there, what is it called when you inherit your position through a family? Anyone know the type of government? Huh?
I don't know.
Did you say an heir?
Yeah.
That's a good word. That's not quite what it's called. I see a hand over here.
Nepotism.
That's a big word. Nepotism means you get favors from your family. Not quite the type of government. Did I see another hand? I don't want to miss anybody. It is called a monarchy,
Oh, yeah.
which is not all that different from the king and queen of England, right? They have a family line of rulers, and Egypt is essentially the first monarchy because it stayed in the family line. There's a lot of extra weirdness that comes with that. Sometimes they didn't marry outside of their family line. So what you basically have is inbreeding and incest and diseases and birth deformities can come from that. So glad we've advanced a little bit from that monarchy. Nice.
What if they didn't have a son?
What if they didn't have a son? What if they only had daughters? There's a line of succession.
Nephew?
Go to I don't want to speak like an authority because I'm not quite sure, but it'd be like the next nephew. Or sometimes there were stepchildren involved, and that was kind of a way to break the family line, but through marriage, stepchildren. So great question. And a lot of times these men, let's just say they keep having daughters. I have all daughters. A lot of times these men would just keep trying to make babies to have a son.
What's the youngest like?
Perfect timing. Let me get these two questions. We're right on time for our bathroom break, so we'll go ahead and do that.
What happens like could it's like a lower rank type king, like some king?
So Liam asked a great question. I showed you the social structure, the triangle. It's very hard to break out of your class. In America, we say you can be anything you want, right? You can break, if your family is lower income, you can break out of that, go to college. Anyone can be president of the United States. That's what we believe. That's pretty normal for us, right? Dream big, American dream. In ancient Egypt and in a lot of societies, it's very hard to break out of your social order. So I see your brains being challenged a little bit. I love that, right? Because you're expanding your thoughts to outside of your own little world, and you're realizing that across time and history, things have been done very differently. A hand and then a hand, and then the bathroom.
What if like the Pharaoh had like the affair with like a lower person?
Oh, he has about an affair, right? Because people do that, human nature. Yeah. Sometimes heirs were made from illegitimate children. Sometimes they broke that family line, or they even broke social order. What if a pharaoh has an offspring with a slave because of, problems or whatever? Yeah, you're exactly right. It gets real complicated. Across 3,000 years of Egyptian history, there are certainly examples of that. I'm not an Egyptologist. I don't have all those answers, but you guys clearly have a curiosity. That's good. If you got more questions, I can try to point you to resources, but you got good questions. Question and then the bathroom.
What's the youngest you can take the throne?
The youngest you could take the throne. I am going to answer that in about 20 minutes from now. So you just remind me. When I get to that, I'm going to point at you, okay? Let's go to the bathroom. Rose, you got our alarm set. Keep me on track. We're having a good conversation. Good conversation. It all started with the toilet paper, didn't it? You guys are ant today. Yeah, you got wrapped up very well. I'll say that.
I got dizzy.
You don't mind. I was gonna have to do it at the end. But thank you.
Seems like a tripping hazard.
Here, this is one of those big bags. Thank you, Jason.
No problem. No, I'm fine. I don't mind. Thank you, guys.
That looks like fun.
Yeah, they were mummies this morning.
That's what I heard.
All right, don't forget, we got here, touch the hand sanitizer, make sure you have a mask with your group. You get the word.
I went to seventh grade the other day and I was having to stand. After they rearranged everything. Just like.
Watch out, bro. I don't want to put it on you, bro. I don't want to put it on you, bro. Watch out, bro. Go talk to her. Go talk to her. Go talk to somebody else. I don't want to put it on you. Only person I put it on is Knox.
What? All right. So snaps for Miss Stroud for cleaning up a mess that you were going to clean up. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Hayden says
Thank you.
she thought it was a tripping hazard, so I appreciate that. Man, y'all are inquisitive. Y'all are engaged. I really appreciate that. I was talking with a couple of you, as we walked the hallway. And I like taking that brain break just as much as y'all like getting on your cell phones because I get to chat it up with y'all, get to know you a little bit better. But I said to a couple of you, "Are you glad you came to school today?" And the answer was yes. That's kind of what I'm going for. I hope you want to come to your first block, right? I don't know about the rest of your day. I don't know how it shakes out, but I hope that you want to come to first block. We're gonna have a great conversation together every day. Aiden, put it up.
Opportunity.
And we'll start your day off with the right, with a good block, at least. So we kind of chunk in our conversation. We talked about the kingdoms, went off the side a little bit, and that's fine. Let me tell you about the Nile. You're in denial. No, you're not. You're in denial. No, you're not. What's the Nile?
The Nile. Longest river in the world.
The Nile River is the longest river in the world, 4,132 miles long. That's long. If you look at this map right here, the United States is about 2,300 miles across, coast to coast. So we're talking the Nile River. I pointed this map a lot. Just get used to it. This is where it starts, and it actually flows south to north. A lot of people think gravity pulls the water downward, right, north to south. That's not the case. The Nile River actually flows, point at the picture now, from the south to the north. And then it opens up and it goes into the Red Sea inside of Egypt. So the Nile River is large enough to be seen from space. This photograph comes from space. Obviously not a photograph that is from ancient Egypt because they didn't have satellites. But we can now, with a space station and satellites and such like that, that is a picture that comes from space. The Nile River, another civilization that pops up around a river. What were the first two significant rivers we talked about?
Euphrates and
Tigris and the Euphrates. I feel like a Pharaoh should have the sword. This one right there. The Tigris and the Euphrates, and the Mesopotamia is called what? The land
Of the
between
two rivers.
the land between two rivers. So life springs up between two rivers. And now what I'm teaching you is that we have a 3,000-year long civilization that is also centered on a river. Do you remember what I said about water? Water is life. Water is life. So here we have again a significant civilization that is connected to a significant river. So longest river in the world, 4,000 miles. Egypt is very often referred to as the gift of the Nile. What do you think that phrase means? How is Egypt the gift of the Nile?
because it opens up into the ancient Egypt.
Was it like, was Egypt
Because it gives,
around it?
But Egypt is around it. Like
there's a lot of water.
there's a lot of water. Do you think Egypt would exist without the Nile?
No.
This civilization we're talking about and all of its splendor, all of the majesty and the riches that come from it, the kings, the monarchy, the wonders of the world, of the pyramids, none of that would exist without the Nile. Life springs up around water. That makes Egypt as the gift of the Nile. And you see the note on the screen there. That's a phrase that actually comes from a Greek historian named Herodotus. And he wrote a history of Egypt in about the year 500 BCE. Kind of one of the earliest comprehensive histories we have about Egypt. That's a little extra. What else I got here? The settlements. Settlements were along the banks of the Nile River, and the way that the river really mattered was very similar to the Tigris and Euphrates. It would flood on schedule. It would flood, and it would water the croplands, making fertile soil. What does fertile mean?
Really good, really
Good
big.
for growing. Yeah, the root word of what other word? Fertilize, fertilization, sure. So it would flood on schedule. And again, if you can't explain the natural phenomenon, what are you going to probably attribute it to? Yeah, a god of some sort, the god of the rivers, the god of the flooding. Flood on schedule, and then the waters would recede, and they'd be able to farm. Flood on schedule, the waters would recede, go back to the river, and then they'd be able to farm. That's called basin irrigation.
What happens if it didn't flood on time?
That's one of, I guess, I'd argue a miracle of the world is that it did regularly flood on time. And you want to get scientific about it, it's related to the Earth's rotation and gravitational pull of the moon and the stars and the planets. Like, it is on schedule because the Earth is on schedule. So whatever you want to believe about that, I think it's God thing, and that's why. What's that? So it's more of a controlled flood at this point. In the ancient of days, they had to let the water go where it went, right? Now they did try to dig some channels and control the water. These days, of course, concrete, steel, dams, all that kind of a stuff, they're able to control the flood. Gravitationally, okay, the science is still there. It will flood, but humans can now control the flood a lot better. That's a great question. I've never gotten that question.
But back in the time though, they didn't see it as a bad thing. You know, I mean, they accepted it. It was,
That's right.
it was a part of their culture. It was a way that they received some of those minerals and things from that. That's why it was the gift of the Nile.
Now it says settlements were along the Nile's banks. And I'm going to show you another picture from space that's really going to describe that. You know what? This is such a good picture. We got to view it in the darkness. If you see this picture, you're going to see exactly where Egyptians live. Where do Egyptians live?
On the water.
Right along the Nile. You can see this big, pull my sword out, this is the Nile. And obviously that's electricity. Okay, again, this is a modern photo, but the electricity and what you can see from space, this is thousands of miles. I know that it's a single snapshot, but get your brain around it. This is thousands of miles right here. This is the opening. This is the ocean that the river opens up into. People, does anybody live right here? Does anybody live right here? Yeah, the darkness means there's no settlements, no electricity, no civilization. So people clearly live along the banks of the Nile, even in the present day. They're tied to the water. Water is life. I said it flows south to north. I just want to point that out because a lot of people think the water would go downward, north to south. The Nile actually defies that logic. It goes from south to north. We're talking about Egypt, right? This is the ancient civilization of Egypt. But presently, the Nile flows through 10 different countries. So it's not economically significant to just Egypt. It passes through 10 different countries, right? It makes a difference in the lives of millions of people across 10 different countries in Africa. At its widest, it is 1.7 miles wide. Like any tracksters in here? Aiden runs track. Righteous, you run track? You run track? I was a track guy. Okay, I was a 1 mile and a 2 mile guy. My best 1 mile ever, I ran in 5:04. Never broke 5. My best 2, and I would not do that today. My best 2 mile ever was 11:03. Never broke 11. Nile is 1.7 miles wide. I could not even run across that thing in less than 10 minutes. Like me personally, I was an average runner. Point is, it is so wide, you couldn't necessarily see across. It's not like you're skipping stones across the Nile. This is a force of nature, 1.7 miles wide. And then depth, average depth, 26 to 36 feet. Anybody got a swimming pool in their backyard? Grandma, friend, you've been in a swimming pool before. You got a swimming pool? How deep is it? You're deep in. How deep is it? Yeah, about 7 feet, right? Your average swimming pool about 7-8 feet deep. I'm 6, so when I go to the bottom of a pool, it's kind of slightly over my head. Maybe my fingertips can reach out. Average depth of the Nile, 26 to 36 feet. Probably could bury a body in there, I would say. Force of nature. Okay, it's a major force of nature, the Nile. Here's a picture from the daytime. Again, you can see how important it is. I'm gonna pass on this video right now, just because I know what else we got to get to. If we have time at the end of our class, we'll finish with this particular video. But as a review, what is the nickname of Egypt?
The gift.
Excellent. Gift of the Nile. Should be on your page, but I'm reviewing you as you go. And then a little less significant, but who coined this phrase? Do you remember? Start with the H. Yeah, what was he? You don't remember his name.
He was I can't remember.
Herodotus was a Greek historian. And I know we're walking ourselves through history, but if you look at my posters, Mesopotamia, Egypt, we got to pass China, unfortunately, but you see we're getting to Greece and Rome. So the Greeks are going to be real significant in our next step of learning. And a Greek historian, Herodotus, he wrote a history on the ancient Egyptian empire, which is pretty formative to what we know about Egypt today. Did I see a hand?
Yes, sir. I don't know. You said the 8. I don't know how to say his name.
What, Herodotus?
Herodotus.
Yeah. No, that's not on there though. That's not on there. Hang on. He saw that page, or he saw that one that started with the H. That's not Herodotus. We'll get there. Laugh at my joke. You're in denial. You're in denial. No, you're in denial. You get it? Denial. You're in denial. Old person joke. All right. So the Nile. We talked about how significant the Nile is. Let's talk about Pharaohs. And you guys started to pull some questions. You guys started to have some curiosity. So let's talk about Pharaohs. The point up front, obviously, it is the leader of ancient Egypt. We've already looked at the triangle. We looked at the social hierarchy. It is the leader of Egypt. The word Pharaoh, they wouldn't have said Pharaoh. I am the Pharaoh. That's not a word they would have used. That's a word we give to it in history. Actually, those Greek historians come up with the word Pharaoh. Pharaoh means great house. It is as if to say, I am the greatest family in the land. My house is the greatest of them all. So I'm the leader of Egypt. I have a great house. That's what Pharaoh means. It was a monarch. We opened the door to that conversation already. A monarchy means it is an inherited position. You said heir. I love that, man. We got some good vocab in this room. And it's a position passed from parent to child. Kind of already talked about how that could lead to complications. If you were the second son, or the third son, or the stepchild, or what if someone is, diseased and they die early? Like all the type of possible interesting scenarios comes into play with a monarchy because people want power. Those in power want to stay in power, And if you're the second child, you probably wish you were the first child so that you would be in power. This all comes into play with a monarchy. Blaze has something.
If you're the second child, and say you're the leader, like your older brother's the leader or something, and they have a kid, would the second child be the leader? Or
So the best example I can give you that I think we'll probably understand is the British royals right now, Prince William, Prince Harry. Now, fortunately, they're not backstabbing each other or, hiring hitmen or whatever, but William is considered the first heir. And then William's children would be the heirs under that. And a lot of times Harry kind of gets that second best, second effort kind of a look because he's the second. And then of course he marries, what's her name, and they leave the royal family. And that is reflective of just how complicated a monarchy is. That's modern day. I mean, it's tabloid stuff, right? You go to the grocery store and you see those magazines about the royals, but it's pretty similar. So I can't answer every little bit of who's next in line, but it's along the same lines as the British royals that we would know today. Did I answer your question? I love it when you guys ask questions. Keep them coming. You see a chunk of years there, nothing you need to memorize. But I just want to say that the era of pharaohs lasted about 3,000 years until annexation by the Roman Empire. And Logan, who was the last pharaoh of Egypt? Cleopatra, right? A female pharaoh, Cleopatra. And Logan, I hate to say it, we're not going to have a whole lot of conversation about Cleopatra, but that is good information you have. So again, look at my posters. Mesopotamia, we're going to walk ourselves to Rome. These things cross over with each other. It's not like we're all Mesopotamia and then we're all Egyptian. I mean, these societies coexisted, but the Romans are going to become very dominant, ultimately taking over North Africa and Egypt. So the end of the Pharaoh reign, 3,000 years of existence, comes to an end with the Roman Empire, and we'll get there in the next couple of weeks.
How did they decide the first Pharaoh?
Very first Pharaoh, how did it happen? Great question. I don't quite have the answer. Great question. I just don't know the exact origin story, but you're probably going to make me look it up. Because every time y'all ask a question I don't know about, I want to look it up. A little bit more about Pharaoh. And again, we've kind of gone there with some of these points. I'll just keep going there. Pharaoh, Ms. Rozier said president, right? President of the United States, top of the American social hierarchy. Our president is a political leader. What is he not?
A Republican.
Oh, Lord. Let me help you. Let me help us out. Our president is not a religious leader. He's not a god. Did Logan say that? That's great. He's not a god. He is commander in chief, but he's not marching into battle. He's not an economic leader. He's not a He's not a leadership feel-good guru. Our president's a political leader. Our president has kind of one role. The Pharaoh had all those roles. He was also seen as an intermediary, a go-between between the people and the gods. So he could speak on behalf of the gods. Now, he was not a god in life. They actually believe he became a god upon death. But he was not a god in life, but he spoke for the gods. So think about it. You're Pharaoh. You're in power. If you write something down and you declare that the gods told me this, people are going to believe that the gods told you what to do. And if you could use that power. You could say, all babies under the age of 2 have to be thrown into the river because the gods told me so. And if the gods told you to do that, the people were probably going to follow that. So there's a whole lot of interesting power that comes with saying that you speak for the god. Civil leader, religious leader, military leader, aka the commander-in-chief is a word we might use. There's a very beautiful concept in Egyptian society that we're talking about called ma'at. No, I didn't just stammer. Okay, ma'at, M-A'-A-T. You see it there. In the past, I've kind of really gone in depth with this in this class, but we're going a little bit faster this semester. Ma'at is, we don't even have an English word for it, right? Isn't that crazy? Language is very interesting. We don't have an English word for ma'at. The best I could probably say for ma'at is it is truth, balance, order, justice, law, morality, all things good. Like the Egyptians had one word for it, ma'at. We would have to combine all those words to try to understand it. Well, the Pharaoh was responsible for maintaining ma'at throughout the kingdom. And there's you could go into a whole lot there. It's kind of a very deep philosophical conversation about what is ma'at. But the Pharaoh's job was not just to reign with an iron fist, not just to declare, murderous edicts or anything like that. He was responsible for maintaining the good order of the kingdom called Ma'at. So interesting thought there. Some of you might be interested in asking more questions about that later. And then, like I said, he did become a god upon death. Not in life, but upon death. Is George Washington a god? Is Abraham Lincoln a god? We would say no. Our presidents don't become gods upon death. But they believe, the Egyptians believe, that their Pharaoh becomes a god upon death. Briefly, I want to talk about a couple of famous pharaohs, right? Because, what kind of an Egypt class would we have if we don't talk about some famous ones? Who's this? Whose face is this? King Tut, a.k.a. King Tut is the nickname. His long name is Tutankhamun, but understandably, we abbreviate that as King Tut. His tomb was found in the Valley of the Kings. So remember, I said that archaeologists are basically just grave robbers. So his grave was robbed in 1922. Only difference is his grave wasn't robbed in the BCs. His grave was robbed in 1922 by an Egyptologist. So I guess if we call ourselves a scientist, we get to rob graves. But his grave was discovered in the 1920s. And that kind of gave the public a renewed interest in Egypt, because now all of a sudden we have artifacts to look at. The artifacts from his tomb went on tour all around the world, and people were fascinated by his death mask, the gold. He was buried with some very unique items, a dagger, hunting tools, jewels and such. So King Tut's tomb and the discovery of it was very significant to our understanding of Egypt and pharaohs. King Tut himself, this is going to sound crazy, right? For how important his tomb is, King Tut himself was not King Tut was not a very significant pharaoh. Aiden, you asked how young someone can become pharaoh. King Tut became pharaoh at age 9. He was the leader of Egypt at age 9.
But
now,
that was money at the age.
Right. Now, in those circumstances, and he's not the only pharaoh that was in the single digits, age 8, 9, 10, whatever. But in those circumstances, the adults would rule for him until he became of age, right? So now you got like side power if you're his parent or step parent or whatever the case may be.
You would not take a 9-year-old pharaoh.
Oh, yeah.
Be
Yeah.
serious.
Would you listen to your 9-year-old? I wouldn't listen to my 9-year-old. I don't have a 9-year-old. I
Did
wouldn't
they
listen to my
actually listen to it?
Huh?
Did they listen to it?
So he issues edicts, he issues official government decrees. He is buried with all the honors of a god. I don't know all the specifics about did they listen to him, because let me tell you, he reigned from age 9 to age 18. He died at 18. He died very young. So he had a 9-10-year rule, like a very short rule.
So he had any kids?
He did not. A great example of how he did not have an heir. And I know you're about to ask who became the next pharaoh. I don't know. He did not have an heir, and this is how the palace intrigue and who stabbed.
Did he have a girlfriend?
Did he have a girlfriend? There's a lot about King Tut, right? You go real deep on King Tut. He is, with my last bullet there, he's a relatively insignificant pharaoh in life, right? Unmemorable. Buried in the Valley of the Kings because he was still seen as a god upon death. He was the pharaoh, so he still got all those honors. But all things considered, he was a relatively insignificant ruler. The only reason we even know about him is because we found his grave intact. Right, the fact that we found his grave intact is what makes us really know about him. There are a lot of thoughts. Right, remember, I told you I'm telling you just a little bit about a couple of famous pharaohs, and you guys are interested, and I love that. There are some thoughts that he had physical deformity. In analyzing his skeleton, it looked like he had one leg longer than another, which means maybe he walked with a limp. Maybe he wasn't very physically dominant. In analyzing his skull, and again, I encourage you to do your own research and stuff like that. Analyzing his skull, it looks like he might have had his skull was shape was consistent with other type of physical deformity, maybe even like a mental health disability. So he was the pharaoh. We don't know everything about him, but as we analyze his skeleton and his tomb, it almost looks like he might have been someone that suffered from a lot of disabilities. So kind of interesting there. I'll tell you one. Let's see here. This is his death mask. So this is what was discovered when they opened his tomb. Obviously, that looks very elegant, very regal. It's made out of a lot of gold. And that, of course, is the very famous picture when you think about pharaohs. You see this picture a lot. That's King.
Yeah,
that's
how much
King.
it's worth?
How much is it worth? Very ironically, I looked that up just last night. It's worth $1.7 million.
Oh, she's
Not quite as much as I thought. I thought it might be
No,
worth
way
more.
more.
Thought it might be
Oh,
worth
so
more.
what is that on his chin?
So that is a beard. The beard is, the wrapped beard. That is kind of a marker of Egyptian royalty.
Yeah, one.
Did he have a beard that long? I don't know, but that is a marker of. They put on a lot of costumes, right? This, just as I have a costume on, they put on a lot of kind of regal jewelry and headdresses and even face paint or makeup, or however you want to call it. This is his actual death mask. It's on display at a museum in Egypt. So I don't know if you're going to take a trip to Egypt. I haven't yet. But you can go visit King Tut's death mask. This is, I'm just showing you some pictures. This is his whole coffin as it was discovered. Obviously, they set it up for photograph, but this was his whole coffin. And this is his grave robber. This is Howard Carter, the Egyptologist, inside his tomb, discovering his coffin and all that kind of a stuff. So what is this type of photograph called? What type of source? An old one. Primary. Yeah, primary source. This is primary source photography, so we can actually trust what we're looking at because it came from the moment of discovery. So really interesting. King Tut. There's so much more. Here's what I'll do. I'll post a couple of articles on Google Classroom. And those of you that care to read them, go for it. Instead of scrolling your TikTok tonight, maybe you'll read something about King Tut. How they know it was. So there are definitely a bunch of markings inside of the tombs. We're going to talk about Egyptian writing here in just a second. So we're able to determine that the years of his life based off of record keeping, his name, all the stuff that was inscribed next to him, and then there is the analysis of the body, the analysis of the artifacts, all that kind of stuff. So good question. Good question. Let me tell you about one more famous pharaoh.
Yes.
And again, across 3,000 years, there's a bunch of them, and I'm not even getting to Cleopatra. The other famous pharaoh I want to tell you about is a she. Her name is Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut. Now, why is this significant that she is a she?
She's the first one.
Women used to have rights.
Because Blaze asked if women even have rights. The Egyptian society was a little bit more advanced on women being able to hold land and be a part of political society, but they were not fully at the point of having female pharaohs very often. Hatshepsut's story is one of those twisted line of succession kind of stories that you guys keep asking me about. Who gets to be the next pharaoh? The circumstances are that she was next in line while her stepson was next in line, and while he was too young to be pharaoh, she was the pharaoh. So the situation I just told you about.
So how old was the stepson? Like 2?
How old was her stepson? Young, very young. Good question. I think it was like 4, but yeah, very young. Her name means, so you can see the years that she reigned. Now the BCE years, of course, they go backwards in time, so it's a little less than 20 years. Kind of a significant reign. Think about it. Our presidents are president for 4 years, and we give them a museum and a library and all that kind of stuff. So she was president. She was a pharaoh for a little less than 20 years. Her name means foremost of noble women. So she was regarded very well as a woman leader in Egypt. And she is notable for expanding the empire through trade and the economy instead of military conquest. Right? If you're a bro, if you're a dude, just think about it. Testosterone, right? What do dudes like to do? You go to war.
Not me.
Hatshepsut, I'm gonna give this to you guys as something to think about. She said, "Why conquest when we can expand the economy? Why kill people when we can expand and bring people into our kingdom without killing them?" So pretty cool how she was able to do that. She a big project in her life. It was the Temple of Luxor, Luxor. And if you have ever been to Las Vegas, and you should never go, but if you ever go to Las Vegas, there's the Luxor Hotel, which is modeled after Hatshepsut's Luxor. So she kind of still carries a legacy through that as well. One more little interesting side fact. Actually, I'll flip to this picture. This is the right-hand side. That is a statue that is said to be, that is her. And then the left-hand side, this is an artistic recreation of what she might have looked like. So you can see that she was, if that's accurate, if you believe that that artist picture is accurate, she's a beautiful Egyptian woman who was the leader of the country. Here's a little interesting side fact, and I'll let all of you think about this. Male, female, you can think about this in your own way. A lot of people tried to erase her from history. In the years after her reign, think about it. Okay, no, don't have digital. We don't have computer records. Don't have the internet, anything like that. The only records were what was written down. Well, after she died, a lot of those records disappeared. The reason we know about her is because of a few records that survived. And then, of course, Egypt archaeologists are a lot like detectives. They had to start putting some clues together. And they noticed that they were looking at records where there were some scratch outs, and they were able to determine that that scratch out was her name. They looked at some buildings where there were etchings, and the etchings were, chunked off, right, chiseled away. They were able to determine that that was her name being erased from that particular etching or that particular building. So I'm glad that we do know enough about her to know her history. And I think it's very interesting to think about the men who came after her and try to erase her from history. This next thought here is something that is just flat out not going to be on your test. I never like to talk about this is on the test. This is extra. I'm telling you, this is extra. This is a monument that is in the United States Capitol. And what do you see on this monument? What can you see? 4 figures. Now, you can definitely see Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. That's 1, 2, and 3. But Liam, you're right. There's 4. What is that 4th? Chunked off, yeah. It's not a face, is it? You know what it is? It is a blank space that is reserved for the first female president of the United States. It has not been carved yet. It will be carved. This is in the United States Capitol. I've seen this. I think I saw this on a visit I took to D.C. in 7th grade. I know I've seen this particular statue before. I just don't have a picture of it. When we have a female president of the United States, this statue will be chiseled with her picture. Here's what I want to give to you, right? I'm not getting into your politics and what you think. I think it's very interesting that Egypt had a female ruler thousands of years before America has not yet had a female ruler. And every election cycle, we have this big debate. Is a woman able to be president of the United States? I would give us that Egypt decided yes, and it was successful. And it's kind of interesting that America hasn't gotten there yet. So we are going to see women at the bottom of the social structure for a lot of history. And guess what? Generation U, it might be your chance to change that. It might be your turn to do something to change.
The first lady, what they gonna call them now?
All right, so interesting conversation so far, right? Those are 2 famous pharaohs. If you know about others, Cleopatra being a big one that Logan has already mentioned in our class. There might be many other pharaohs, kind of interesting for you to research on your own. This is exactly what I mean by I hope I kind of spark some curiosity in you. And then you can go and research it more yourself. Be curious for yourself. We'll move on to Egyptian religion. Kind of said a lot of this already, but I just want to bring it all together and, of course, walk through your notes. In Egypt and the Egyptians, this is one of the first civilizations to believe in an afterlife. Prior to this, and the Mesopotamian conversation we've already come through, dead was dead, right? In the ground was in the ground. They didn't necessarily believe in an afterlife. Whereas the Egyptians very much did, and a big part of preparation for the afterlife was, especially for a pharaoh, especially was building a very elaborate burial tomb. And in the age of the pyramids, that is, the pharaohs would build pyramids as their burial chamber. Now think about it. How much space does a person really need to be buried? How much space does a person need for burial? Like 6 feet, 3 feet, however far down you want to go. Obviously, you don't need an entire building to bury a body, but that wasn't the point. The point was to show that this person was significant in life, to give them, and here's something they believe. They believe that what you were buried with, you would have access to in the afterlife. They believe that if you needed weapons, you had to be buried with weapons. If If you needed money, you had to be buried with money. A lot of times, pharaohs and pyramids, we're going to talk about pyramids in depth tomorrow, so I'm not going to go too far on the pyramid conversation. A lot of times, pyramids would have extra rooms for servants to be buried alongside the pharaohs because they needed their servants in the afterlife. Right? So, very interesting perspective on the afterlife, and obviously that's something that people are fascinated with today as well. What comes after death? A whole lot of different beliefs on that. The Egyptians were some of the first to talk about or to think about the afterlife. Another part of that was that your body had to be prepared for the afterlife or preserved. And of course, what is the way that they would preserve bodies? What we just did. What is that? Mummification. Right? We call it a mummy. That's the thing. That's the noun. Or the process is called mummification. Mummification is actually a medical advance. Right? You might think of it as from a religious perspective because they're burying them and preparing them for the afterlife. But the actual process of mummification was very advanced medical ability, especially for the BCE, time frame. Yes, ma'am.
What did they use?
Great question. What did they use? Now, I'm not a total expert, but I do have the 7 steps of mummification. So step 1 would be the announcement of death. That's obviously not necessarily related to the medical side of it, but the first thing is you have to announce that a person has died, their soul has left their body, they have died. Step 2, embalming the body, and that is where the medical process starts to be involved in different chemicals and such. And I don't want to. A lot of times, here's what I say when y'all have scientific questions I don't have the answer to. Y'all got to go ask McGuire. Pretty good friends with Mr. McGuire. We go to church together, so I always just send you on down to McGuire's room if you have a scientific question. Step 3 is removal of the brain. So you do have to remove these disposable organs because it's the organs that rot and make a body stink. How did they remove the brain? Anybody know? Instruments would go up the nose canal and they dig the brain out.
Oh my God, they were doing that.
So there's your how, Jackie. There's your how. Step 4, internal organs removed. So that would be internal organs removed. What? Dry the body out, wrap the body. I suppose that's the step y'all came in on. Wrapping the body, right? That's how we started. And then there's the final presentation. So this is the mummification process. And that's very different from just putting a body in the ground. So big advances scientifically from that as well. Here's a little extra for you, another little interesting extra. As modern era people started to explore Egypt and discover more of the Valley of the Kings, and by the way, mummification was not just for pharaohs. Mummification was for the noble class, or if you were rich enough to have that process done to you. A lot of people were mummified. It's just the pharaohs were buried with, the largest and most elaborate tombs. So mummies are being discovered all over Egypt in the modern era, in the 1900s. And there's this myth that starts to be perpetuated that if you were to grind up a mummy, this is someone's body, by the way. This is a human being. But ground up mummy has medicinal purposes. It can cure your headache. It can cure your stomach ache. I think it can cure your stomach ache. People would literally ingest ground up mummy in order to, because it's kind of like a, voodoo medicine, fake medicine.
So they're
Now, Blaze says, is that cannibal, right? They were cannibal. Yeah, now they're not eating it maybe as a steak, but in a way they're consuming humans. So that's a good thought. I've never really thought of it as cannibalism. So this is, I'm not making this up. This is a photograph of a man selling a mummy. He discovered this mummy. He's a grave robber, obviously, what you could say. And he is trying to sell this mummy because of this voodoo whacked out idea that the mummy can actually have medicinal properties. So that's extra.
Did it sell?
Yeah, sold. In fact, mummies started to disappear off of the Egyptian landscape because of this. It's kind of a finite resource. There's only so many of them. And people were robbing tombs in the 18 and 1900s, selling them to Europeans who thought that this had a medicinal property. Crazy. Anyway, that's a side extra, just kind of showing you some interesting. This one might make you chuckle as well. Fun fact, the year 1974, another famous pharaoh we didn't talk about, Ramesses, he was, his mummy was going on world tour from a museum's perspective, and to travel from Egypt to France, he had to get a passport because all humans had to travel with a passport. So Ramesses II, 3,000 years later, had to get a passport to travel to France. Isn't that funny? Right? What's wrong with people? Why do we make a mummy have a passport? All right, I'm going to round out this conversation with one more topic. I know what time it is. I'm going to round out this conversation with one more topic, and that is the Egyptian style of writing called hieroglyphs. And this is on your notes. It starts with H, hieroglyphs. You can see it on the top of the screen there. Let's make a comparison. What was Mesopotamian writing called? Wedge-shaped clay tablets. Cuneiform. Okay, so that's Mesopotamian writing. Well, now I'm giving you another one. Egyptian writing is called hieroglyphs. Mesopotamia had rivers, significant rivers. Egypt has rivers. Mesopotamia has a significant writing system. Egypt has a writing system. So this is the comparison we're going to make across these civilizations. Hieroglyph is a Greek phrase for sacred writing because it's the writing of the gods. This writing now, the cuneiform was written on what? What item? Clay tablets, sun-hardened clay tablets. Hieroglyphs are written on papyrus, which sounds a whole lot like what word? Paper. Yeah. Papyrus is basically a flattened out reed, a plant that you would flatten out, dry, and kind of gives you a flaky, moldable paper. Almost. Yeah. Now, of course, today we use wood pulp, and there's a process to make paper. But papyrus, that's the start word. That's the beginning of using the word paper. And the picture you see, that is the papyrus. So you can kind of tell how it's flattened out. It's probably, it's brittle. Obviously, it's old. And then, of course, what you're seeing looks like little pictures, right? It's almost code. I think it's almost like a bird. That's right. It's almost like code writing, where each picture has a meaning. And of course, if you're educated and you're a scribe, and the same rules for scribes apply, you got to go through a lot of school. And who gets to go through that school? Males, right? So there's a little progress for women in Egypt, but the scribe position is still limited to males. Something real tricky about hieroglyphs is that they can be read from any direction. Top to bottom, that's not normal for us. Left to right, that's how we read. But guess what? It could also be read from right to left. So you kind of had to know how the scribe was writing to know if you're reading from top to bottom, left to right, or right to left. And then made this comparison last time. How many letters have you had to learn in your life? 26. 26 letters make up every word that you could possibly need to know. Yeah, hang on, I don't know what you're packing up. This is my last section. Yeah, go read that word. Yeah, 29. I said this is my last section, not my last little sentence. You guys have had to learn 26 letters in your life. Well, there were over 700 hieroglyphs. A little bit better than 8,000 cuneiform etches, but 700 hieroglyphs, that's a lot of learning, right? To be educated, to be able to write. But we're on hieroglyphs. So the picture, Liam pointed out, what picture did you see, Liam?
You saw the bird.
You saw a bird, right? It was a sketch that looked like a bird. Well, the picture could be exactly the image that it shows. Bird means bird. Or it could be the sound that object makes when spoken. And I'll make a different example other than bird. It'd be like eye. If I drew a picture of an eyeball, I might mean the word eye, or the sound eye. Okay, eyeball means eye. Or it could be a similar symbol for a similar word, such as if I drew eyeballs, it might mean to see. So just use the eyeball. The picture could mean an actual eye, the sound eye, or the phrase to see. So you kind of got to be a code cracker to know how to read Egyptian hieroglyphs. And then how you actually write a sentence. You write a sentence by combining all these hieroglyphs in order to try to write the sentence that you actually are going for. And then everything I just described, fancier words, a logogram, a phonogram, or a determinative, that means the sound, the actual word, or representative of what that word means. This is extra. This is not. Well, you guys, what I have here, right? 3 more facts. Yeah, this is where I know might be asking a lot of you. When it says write 3 facts you learned, that means I want you to listen to the whole conversation and write along as you go. Write 3 extra facts. So we will kind of have an extensive conversation about hieroglyphs, and that means that you can kind of jot down some extra notes as we go. 3 basic types of hieroglyphs. The picture represents the word, the picture represents the sound, or the picture represents the phrase that it actually is, like to see, eyeballs to see. We are wrapping up. We've had a big conversation today. Started with a bang, started with the mummification. And you guys have been really inquisitive, and I appreciate that. We'll spend tomorrow in Egypt as well. So come back ready to learn some more about Egypt. Here is my last joke of the day. If you're an Egyptian scribe, if you're an American English student, Miss Gerardo, Miss Carter, they're going to tell you I before E except after C, right? That's how you spell. Well, if you're an Egyptian scribe, your teacher might admonish you by saying I before flee except after C, because you're writing with pictures, not letters. Ha ha ha. You're in denial. No, you're in denial. All right, go ahead and wrap it up there. We'll pick up the conversation tomorrow. Go ahead and wrap it up there. We learned something today. You're going to walk out of the room knowing more than when you walked into the room. That's what I'm going for. That's what we're going for every day. So I know there's a lot of information thrown at you. The reason we write it down is so you can review it later. And then, of course, what am I going to offer you before test? Study guide. I'm going to give you a study guide that's going to focus your attention on the stuff that you really need to know for the benchmark exam. So good job today. I appreciate it. We do have about 7 minutes, so tidy up, and appreciate your time and attention like always.